my screen. Good morning and good evening to everyone who's joining us from South Africa and Singapore and wherever else you are in the world. My name is Kieran Heatley, Executive Director for the South African Chamber of Commerce Singapore. I'm going to hand over shortly to Ms. Sujata in a second. I just want to give everyone a brief overview of the Chamber and some housekeeping rules. So for those who don't know about the Chamber, we are a non-profit organization. We act as a platform and a conduit to connect businesses to government and to individuals and to foster bilateral trade between South Africa and Southeast Asia. So just some housekeeping rules. If you could please keep yourselves on mute, keep your cameras off in respect for the speakers. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll answer them if we have time towards the end. So now I'm going to hand over to Ms. Sujata Tiwari, who's going to give an introduction to our speakers and open and welcome. Thanks, Sujata.
Thanks, Kerry. Good day and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you join us for today's Women in Business Subcommittee's online event hosted by the South African Chamber of Commerce Singapore. This session, titled From Finish Lines to Front Lines, is proudly brought to you in collaboration with the International Women's Federation of Commerce and Industry for South Africa and Singapore. We are especially proud to be hosting this event in the lead up to National Women's Day in South Africa, celebrated on August 9th. It's a time when we honor the courage, leadership, and contributions of women, not just in history, but in boardrooms, businesses, and beyond. August is Women's Month in South Africa, and this event is part of that celebration. My name is Sujata Tiwari. I'm an entrepreneur, life mentor, author, keynote speaker, mental well-being consultant, and a proud member of our Women in Business Subcommittee, and I'll be introducing our remarkable lineup of speakers. First, we have long-standing Chamber supporter and co-founder of Asia Innovate Hub, Ms. Jasmine Goh. Jasmine took up running in her early 30s and went on to represent Singapore twice as a national marathoner at the SEA Games. Next, joining us from South Africa is Ms. Dishon Bester, founder and CEO of 10X Energy Africa and the first Black female high-altitude mountaineer. Our third speaker is Ms. Jocelyn Yeo, co-founder of Into the Wild. Jocelyn is a national swimmer for Singapore, having competed in 4 Olympic Games and holds the record for the most SEA Games medals ever won by a Singaporean athlete. Moderating today's session is our Ms. Charmaine Wather, a medical technologist by profession with an MBA in business leadership, regional director of a multinational pharmaceutical company, and a very valued member of our Women in Business Subcommittee. Kerry has said this already, but I'll still repeat. A quick reminder before we begin. Please stay on mute and feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll take 1 or 2 questions at the end of this discussion. With that, I now hand over to Charmaine to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sujata. And yes, an absolute honor to be amongst 3 esteemed panelists for today. So I want to kick off with Jasmine. So you've heard a little bit about her being the national champion of marathons, but I want to ask Jasmine to please talk us through her journey. For many of you that may not have known or read, she actually started running quite late in her career. And I would like her to just talk us through, with no prior history, how through relentless curiosity and dedication, she rose to become a national representative within the Southeast Asia Games. So Jasmine, over to you.
Thank you, Charmaine. Okay, testing. Okay, I think okay, good. Coming loud and clear. Coming through loud and clear. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Jasmine. People who runs knows me as the national marathoner, or the lady who somehow kicking ass in her 40s and late 30s, right? A lot of question as to why I took up running so late, and what was the mindset that made me, eventually become a national athlete. I think, first of all, the story begins because of a divorce, right? Um, I think for many of us, family, for females, family is important. And when we lose that structure, we lose our identity, right? So for me, it was trying to find myself back again. And it was also very important for me to transform myself. I think I was at the point in my life thinking, I've been a wife, stay-home mom, and then suddenly everything was falling apart. And it was important for me to find, first of all, who Jasmine Goh is, right? She's not just a stay-home mom, like a housewife, and but she's got goals and dreams. She's got things that she wants to achieve. And I think one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to transform myself. And I think a lot of ladies were like, you do your nails, you do your hair. I decided, why don't I just run? Like I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to be a strong role model for my children. Then I had two girls very young. I remember they were 4 and 2, and I looked at them and I said, I wanted them to look back and said, even after a divorce, mommy got stronger. Mommy transformed herself. She didn't just let um, the circumstances affect her. So it was never like I wanted to become a national athlete. It was just more like taking stock of where I am, and wanting to be healthier and be a role model for my children. And along the way, I realized I'm actually quite good at it. And I also think it's because, like what Charmaine said, it was the curiosity, right? How can I be better? And I think one of the things that helped my journey, self-transformation journey, in running, I'm just going to talk about running since we're talking about this journey, this part of my life, was that I realized for any of us who has a goal and wants to achieve something, we always have to set milestones that you want to hit, right? And for me, if I want to continue to run, I realize I need to sign up for races so that I'm committed. Most of us would then, a lot of people would have New Year resolutions that fail because it's so easy to say, I want to be fit, I want to lose weight, I want to lose X amount of weight, or I want to spend X amount of time taking care of myself. But you find that, after 1 week or two, you go back to your old habits. And for me, I didn't want it to be that case because, obviously I wanted to, I really had a very strong motivation, my goals. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sign up for my first race even before I started running. So at that point in time, I remember I was 32. It was very near my birthday. I was walking around and I saw a roadshow by Standard Chartered Marathon, and they were selling race slots, right? So there were different distances, and then as I walked through the roadshow, I look at the price, and if you know me, I am value driven. So when I look at the price for 5K and 10K and 21K and a marathon, and at a point in time, I have no idea what a marathon is. It was 42K. I was like, hey, about the same price. I picked the longest because it feels like it's, makes sense, right? I'm gonna obviously drink a lot of 100+ along the way. Maximize my money is value for money. So I signed up for a marathon, not knowing whether I could run it or not. But then also it forces me to put things in place, a structure which I needed, a commitment, um, because the race is coming. So anyway, just to cut the story short, obviously I finished because I'm driven, I'm motivated by my girls. I wanted to be a role model. I want to come back with a finishing medal. And at that point in time, I had also support. So I just want to know and let ladies know that when you have a goal and you want to be committed to it, it's also good for you to share that with people around you because you want them to support you. So I was also, sharing that with my kids. I was sharing it with my siblings. In fact, I actually made my siblings sign up for their first mirror with me. So you can imagine that then I was not the only one in pain. After the first mirror, there were 4 people who struggled with me: myself, my younger sister, my brother, and his wife. So it was not a lonely journey, thank God. I had the support of family. But then fast forward, because I realized that I have the I suppose the correct mindset, and I could so I kept pushing myself to achieve better results, and I was committed right to the goal. Then I realized I was actually quite good at running, and I just want to bring you back to 2015 when SEA Games was in Singapore. So we hosted SEA Games, and I was there supporting people running the marathon because some of them were my friends, are my friends. And then I was at the closing ceremony with my children, and I see the Singapore delegates coming out, and I said, and I turned to my kids, and I remember that moment very clearly. I turned to my kids and I said, next year, or not next year, the next edition, Mommy wants to be one of the athletes coming out. So then that set the intention and again the goal. And of course, I have to put structure in place. And eventually I did after 2 years. 2017, I was in KL for my first mara. And I'm just going to wrap this up by saying 2022, I also went to Hanoi for the SEA Games. And unlike Jocelyn, who's got, I think, Jocelyn, you're record holder for the most number of medals for SEA Games, is it? That's what I heard earlier in the introduction, yeah. I also hold another record. The Hanoi Times was saying that I'm the oldest contestant for the marathon. So imagine at the age of 43, towing the line, men, women, doesn't matter. I'm the oldest. So just it was, my mom is like, enough, Jasmine. You gotta let the younger girls take the spot. So yeah, I think that's in short my journey. It's not easy. I'm not saying, by all means, I'm not saying it's easy, but it took a lot of commitment. And I think what drove me was just because I wanted to be that role model for my children.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing. I also want to encourage our listeners to please post their comments and questions in the chat. I'm loving the energy and the reactions, and I'm going to come back to you after we go through each of the panelists. But something I want you to ponder about. It's been 2 years that you've also co-founder and head of operations in sales for Asia Hub, Innovative Hub, and I want to visit this big transformation that you made, starting off in wealth management, coming into tech now, which is a booming industry, and what that takes to make that pivot. So are we going to park that, come back to that? And now I want to move on to Deshawn. And, we've got such a mix of women that have energy out there with activities in the sports field. And Deshawn, with you tackling Mount Everest and Kilimanjaro, I am so curious for you to share with us some of those personal and professional strategies that you've deployed to conquer those heights. And then how did that translate into the boardroom and business? So over to you, Deshawn.
Thank you so much, Charmaine, and good morning and good evening to all of our attendees. I apologize for any background noise. I'm actually sitting in an airport lounge. So if you hear any kind of announcement, it's not for my flight, not yet anyway. So thank you for that question. I actually think what is worthwhile is to talk about my entry into mountaineering. So I was a member of South Africa's first Everest expedition in 1996. And for those of you who are old enough, you'll remember that 96 was actually quite a tumultuous year on the mountain. And, it actually inspired a number of movies and books and all sorts of things back at the time. Harvard even has a leadership case study based on some of the leadership decisions that were made on the mountain that year. There's a Hollywood movie out. There's the book Into Thin Air. I'm sure that some of you have come across some of these things. But so for me, what is so pertinent about my climbing career is that before I started climbing, I actually had to overcome a number of mountains in my personal life as well. One of those mountains is that I was born in 1970, so right in the heart of apartheid South Africa. Living in the townships, grew up with working class parents. My dad's a bricklayer, retired, and sadly passed away now. So did my mom. But she was a machinist. She worked in the textile factories. And so you can just imagine those circumstances and a little girl deciding at that very young age, I think I was about 6 or 7 when I got hypnotized by the concept of becoming an adventurer. And, just opportunities were not there for people like me, and especially for girls as well. So when I first saw, fast forward now many years later in 1995, an advert for the first South African Mount Everest expedition. And it just ignites something about the little girl in me who've always dreamt about being an adventurer and someone who kind of, can be featured in a National Geographic magazine or, just that kind of thing. So there was always that kind of fantasy in the back of my head about being an adventurer. And so I signed up to be a part of the first South African expedition. And we had Madiba Magic in South Africa back in those days. So it was an easy time to kind of envision a new South Africa, a new future, a new hope. And I kind of, at the time, didn't realize it, but I was jumping onto that bandwagon of how can we recreate a new narrative about what it means to be a South African. And so when I came back from that expedition, our team having planted the flag successfully at the top of the mountain, it opened up so many things for me, so many new avenues, so many new things to explore, because my career was going to be so limited under apartheid, but now suddenly, I could literally, the world was my oyster type of thing. And I was a school teacher at the time. And then suddenly sort of found myself pulled into the world of motivational speaking, ended up speaking all over the world, and then developed from there into, training professionally, facilitating, becoming a business coach and facilitator. So over the years, what I have discovered are the parallels between high altitude climbing and what I discovered my clients dealing with. And a lot of it came down to leadership, strategy, communication, and culture. And so to pivot my experiences as a climber into how does that juxtapose itself onto the experiences my clients have in their workplace and how they manage staff and how they build strategy, that I actually got to the point of trademarking 3 bits of IP. The one bit is called Tackling the Summit. It's literally around that thing of strategic envisioning. The next one is Imprints in the Snow, which is around the idea of how do you lead and follow effectively. And it's becoming especially important now in the times that we're in. We can't just make leadership assumptions anymore. You need to also think about what kind of followers do you have around you. And then thirdly, as performance management, we now call it performance development. And what does that have to do with the way we navigate our way through the 21st century? And in the role that I've played with various companies, I then ended up working with a number of incubation programs, more markedly the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship in South Africa, and ended up becoming quite a strong advisor to some startups. Some of them have become spectacularly successful. And 10X Energy Africa was actually an advisory role for me at first, and then they invited me to become their CEO this year. So I'm new at 10X in the energy space, and it's just such a fascinating development for me because once again gives me a platform to make a difference. we're talking about green energies, turning waste tires into high quality products like oil, like recovered carbon, so it's a circular economy model. So that's just kind of like how climbing has opened up all of these other avenues for me, and things that I perhaps couldn't have unlocked for myself had I not only climbed some of the big mountains in the world, Everest and Kilimanjaro being two of them, but I have climbed on 5 continents. I like to get high. And so I really do. I extrapolate a lot of my learnings from my climbing expeditions into how I lead teams, and specifically I get to do that with 10X Energy Africa now as well. Thank you, Charmaine.
Wow, Deshawn, this is super amazing, super inspiring. As you chat, there's just so much of inspiration that you can get from creating your own narrative, right? And I think it's something we'll definitely come back to, because I feel like I want to just have all of the speakers to ask my questions, but we'll wait to see what the group's got while I make note. So thank you so much. I personally want to learn more about the imprints in the snow, and the leadership element, not just about climbing up, but also, like you said, the followers that are amongst us, and what is the impact of what we do, what we say, and how we do that on it. So that's something I'm going to come back to you on after we're done. So I want to now introduce our third panelist, Jocelyn. And Jocelyn, yes, yet another amazing achiever within our midst. And Jocelyn is often coined the Southeast Asia Games legend. And if many of you may not know why, is within her reign. She has 40 gold medals across the SEA Games that she's participated in between 1991 and 2005. And for that, she holds the records of the most SEA Games medalists ever won by a Singaporean. So we are very proud and very privileged to hear about your journey, how it started and where you are now. So over to you, Jocelyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Charmaine. Yeah, it's an honor for me to be here, and I think to hear as well, from Jasmine and Deshawn's journeys, and how the impact that they're making in the journeys that they've taken. So for myself, I started swimming at a very young age, and I think there was good and bad in that. I was a very, very competitive person by nature, and I think that I did not like to lose. And from a young age, I think I would get very upset if I lost. And I think again, it was good and bad, right? I did not know how to react, and so I wouldn't throw a tantrum, but I would always end up crying and being quite mad at myself for not winning a certain race. And I think eventually I learned to be kind to myself. And I think that was something that helped me build some steel from within and build strength from within, to then face bigger challenges later on. So I think for me, that was quite a big one. I learned to also ask for help along the way, I think, because you really can't do it alone. And I think Jasmine knows this as well. You really need your support system. You need people around you. And I think that oftentimes people think that athletes are supposed to be strong, and they're supposed to be fast, and they're supposed to be like this superhuman, but really we're just human. And I think I learned also to receive help. I think a lot of times that you think you gotta be strong. You cannot be weak. You're supposed to be this athlete. You're not supposed to show any kind of weakness. Or people will trample all over you. But the truth is, we all need help. And so I learned to ask for help. I learned to receive help. And I in that manner, I think I grew to have success. I think that it was not easy because I think everybody sees the gold medals and they see the results, right? But people don't see the mental and emotional toil that goes on behind that. And it was not easy. I swam at a time that um, I guess I was the main swimmer for the nation, and so every games that I went to, I felt the weight of the nation upon me, and I think it was very hard because there weren't any other swimmers to spread that load, and I think initially it was hard for me to handle that pressure, but over time I learned how to, and yeah, and I I guess that helped me, start to achieve bigger and better results. So that's kind of, I think, the life lessons that I learned along the way. I then went on to do a bunch of things, and right now, what I do is I run my own company. I do outdoor camps for kids, for corporates, and it's all about really passing on that um I guess lesson of how do you build grit and resilience into your life and allow that to then permeate the other areas of your life so that you could be successful as well in whatever you do. So I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of me and my journey. Yeah. Over to you,
Thank you.
Charmaine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for sharing. Um, some really key elements that stood up, right? Performance pressures. It's not just about performance as in the element of a sports, right? It's that pressure emotionally, mentally. So there's, and I'm sure a lot of our audience identifies with that. And then also, you mentioned young, but you didn't say 11 years old being your first, national platform. That's a lot of pressure already. And that pressure doesn't go away. It stays with you, right? And we find that both personally and professionally. So something I definitely like to come up, and have a chat about it. So now we're going to open up to the panel. We have some questions that we, have surfaced amongst people that often ask questions when we do have these chats. So we're going to kick off with that. But I'd really like to encourage the group to write out their questions also on the chat so we can keep that going. And we've got Kerry that would be monitoring that, as well as Sujata, and we can always come back to it. So thank you so much, ladies, for sharing. So Jasmine, I want to come back to you. And you've started off by talking us through all of the challenges that you've overcome and what it took to kind of really um, find yourself again, right? So many of us, and it's got nothing to do with being a woman, but so many of us have an identity that we live up to. And then life happens, something unexpected, and we often find that we have to find ourselves in business. They talk about, having to unlearn some things that we learned, relearn, things, and be open. And I want to then ask you, with all of this happening, you, of course, had to come up with so much more, talking about challenges. So can you talk to us about what is it outside of, yes, I know you said the kids were there, your motivation, but it's so important to also not be afraid to embrace challenges. To talk us through how important that and the role that played in, in uplifting not just yourself, but the kids around you as well, and then everyone around you in your network to then enter into the professional world.
Thank you, Charmaine. I think that was a very long question. I'm really quite not sure where to start, but I think um, let's start from the beginning, right? Obviously, I wanted to be a role model for my children, but I think at the same time, there was that inner knowing, like I always say, be the rising tide that raises all boats. And I think all of us here have a role to play in empowering people around us, especially women. I see my friends, people of my age, and sometimes they let family or they let circumstances overcome them or take the space, or rather, what I'm trying to say is they don't dare to pursue what they want because they think they have to give it up for their children, their spouse, their existing career or something that they studied in school. Therefore, they hesitate to make a switch mid-career. But I think all that is coming and should disintegrate in this time and age because it's first of all very easy, maybe not so easy, but what I mean is it's easy to re-educate yourself. It's easy to get information. It's easy to get um, people that you can find and check in with or consult with. That is that we shouldn't limit ourselves. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. We shouldn't limit ourselves and think that, oh, we can't do this because I'm too old. We can't do this because have vested so much time in this career that I can't make a switch. Um, if I had that thought in my mind, I wouldn't have started running at all because physically it was very difficult to run, right? I mean, it's, I remember taking my first run around the neighborhood after I signed up for my race, and I was thinking, oh shit, I have a 42K run that I have to do at the end of 4 months, and I am starting from zero. So then it was like, if I had thought that I can't do it because I'm a stay-home mom, I've um, I'm a woman, I'm too old, I shouldn't be pursuing this, I wouldn't become an athlete or national athlete 5 years down the road, 8 years down the road. So maybe what I'm trying to say is all of us have false assumption and beliefs, and that sets a false glass ceiling to our what we think we can achieve. But if you can just remove that and rethink or rewrite that narrative of who you are, then perhaps if you can erase all that you know and then rewrite the story again, who can I be? Who can Charmaine be? Who can Jocelyn be? Who can Jasmine be? Then you realize that um, there's no glass ceiling or there's no limit to what you potentially can be. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to just ask one question because it came through, and then I'm going to move on as well. So one of the questions that comes through, and I think it could be apt as well in terms of for each of you is when you kind of nearing the end of the career, right? This came from Ruth. You know, how I'm not sure if you are able to see the chat, but basically, how has your idea of success changed over time? And what advice would you give to those of us that's preparing for that next chapter beyond the boardroom? So she would like each of you to give your view on that. So for the remaining panelists, feel free to respond in writing. Jocelyn, as well, with you and Deshaun. Jasmine, while I've got you in the line, I'm wondering if you want to just add a comment to that.
I think as I get older, I think compassion is big for me, right? And I think a compassion will allow you to try new things because self-compassion, I believe, especially the athletes in us, right? The competitive thread in Jocelyn and Deshaun and me, um, is the one that pushes us to excel in what we do, but at the same time can also hold us back. And therefore, if we're thinking of switching, and when I made that switch into tech, um, I'm the least tech. Like I can't even press Zoom buttons, you know. Like sometimes I struggle to unmute myself. Like people be like, you're not unmute, and you can't even share screen properly. And here I am heading a tech company selling enterprise SaaS to corporates, right? If I again, if I had an image of me saying, "Oh no, I can't do it because I'm a woman," at the tech industry is just with all the guys, like a guy would sell better than me. That's not true. It's a narrative that I hold, a false belief. How can I rewrite that? Right? I can learn, and I think that's that. Um, it's not easy, yes. And I tell you, maybe I'm drifting a little bit and going off tangent, but I think one of the things I want to say is I realize that when I'm assertive, people say I'm bitchy or bossy. But when a man is assertive, they are decisive. I think that's very unfair. Sorry, just
Definitely,
ranting.
definitely.
I don't know if anyone feels the same. Maybe Jocelyn, because you run your own company, you would feel that when you're talking to your staff or um, um, people in business, and then you're like, "Why are you so bitchy?" Because I know I'm not. I'm just decisive and assertive. But for a man, it'll be like, "Oh, he's so passionate, decisive." I'm like, "Woman is bossy, bitchy." I don't know. I hope to change that though.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jasmine. So, Deshaun, I want to move over for a question that I think you can also give some feeling to. So, we've got a question here that comes from Damien, and he says, many of us strive to be independent and self-sufficient, but how does one learn that it's okay to ask for help, and that in doing so, it's normal, right? Because this is something both personally, professionally. So, can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I want to jump onto what Jasmine's just been saying about, you don't have to be a tech person to lead in tech. So I think it comes down to the same thing when you're leading any kind of team. Like for instance, this energy team. I mean, I've got PhD, masters, and people in engineering that have been in engineering for 30 something years in my team. And I'm new to this industry. So one of the things that I always emphasize for them is that I cannot lead without your support, and I cannot lead without your insight. So they invited me onto the team to participate in developing its success, because it's still a startup. But knowing full well that my work is that of bringing alignment, cohesion, and driving the vision of the company, and obviously also creating stakeholder engagement opportunities for us. So I think it's important to understand where your strengths are. Apologies for that. We have a boarding announcement. I think it's also important to just be able to feel okay about everybody's strength. Okay, so everyone has their experience, everyone has their skill set, and everyone has a strength that you don't go to university to find out about. And so my job is to help everyone feel like if it's not my strength, it's okay to ask someone else for help. In that way, you don't put yourself in a position where you feel weak for asking. You're putting yourself into a position where you're willing to learn and you're curious about how you can assist someone else and how someone else can assist you. So I hope that kind of, brings together some of the principles I use when it comes to, effective team functioning, but in my case, also effective leadership of a team where I'm not the technical expert.
Thank you so much, Deshaun. And leading on to that, so I want to keep you on the call here. How do you stay true to yourself in a world that often expects you to perform, not just compete? And you just spoke about performance, so I would like us to just build on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that really is a tough one. When I started in high altitude mountaineering, number one, there weren't many females at the time. And number two, I was the first Black female in the world. So people had huge expectations. There were some who expected me to fail. I think they were probably in the majority at that stage. But there were also those who were willing to help me. And so one of the things that helped me really like overcome things where there's such a huge expectation, like Jocelyn was saying, is that I ask myself the question about enjoyment. Do I still enjoy what I'm doing? And if I enjoy it, can I give it all? Can I put my heart into it? Can I do it like it's the biggest joy of my life? And the minute I plug myself into that way of thinking, it takes away the burden of people's expectations. And I also find that the greater your enjoyment, the better your chances of succeeding. So so, it is tougher for women because I think there are people who are waiting for us to not do the right thing, or they just waiting for that one. I was watching with interest when Kamala Harris was, aiming to be the president of the United States. There are just things that she got criticized for that people would never think about criticizing a man for. You're not allowed to stumble over your words. You're not allowed to sound like you a little bit, reflecting and thinking about what your right answer should be because you're hesitant and you come across as weak. So there are all these expectations on women and women leaders. And at the end of the day, we do have to overcome so many, but it causes a dialogue in your own head about whether you're worthy or not. So I completely nullify all of that by plugging into my enjoyment of the thing that I need to do. And I've just found it to help me cope, actually. And, criticism will come. We can't listen to all of it. And sometimes you've just got to mute. It's good to get feedback, but some criticism can be very snarky and bitter, and it's not helpful if you're trying to build, especially a leadership brand for yourself.
Thank you so much, Deshaun. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm hoping we're going to have some time to come back to pick a bit more gems out of that. So I want to call on Jocelyn now. And Jocelyn, there's a question for you. What would you say to women who feel like there's just no room to put themselves first?
I think that there is this concept of helping yourself first before you can help others. Whenever you get on an airplane, they always say put your oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your kids, because if you don't survive, how's your kid gonna survive, right? So I think it's that same concept that if you don't put yourself first and make sure that you're healthy and that you love yourself and that you're good to go, how are you going to impact anybody else? How are you going to make a difference to your kids, or how are you going to be effective at work? I think that I think that's really how you need to view it, and that the only way that you can actually be effective or be productive is to first help yourself and put yourself first by doing so. Yeah.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So Jocelyn, as part of your ongoing profession and part of giving back, you're a very spiritual person, and you do a lot of coaching and mentoring as well with, with young teenagers, young adults. But in the call, I'm sure we've got, mothers, we've got wives, we've got siblings. So I want to just ask, if you look at your, the people that you are working with, the people coaching, what are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice you find yourself constantly circling back to, because it's such a common trend and need out there? Can you share that?
I think one is really, like I said just now, to be kind to yourself. I think that oftentimes women can be very hard on themselves. And maybe it's that expectation that other people have put on them, like Deshaun was saying, that there's more expectation on you, on a woman, and then maybe a man. And so I think that if you buy into that, you can end up beating yourself up a lot. So I think one is really to be kind to yourself. I think that through my journey, I've also realized that you will fail a lot in life. Whether, I mean, for me, it's whether it's in sport, whether it's in life, whether it's with my kids, whether it's with work, you will fail, right? But to realize that just because something does not go your way doesn't mean that you are a failure. It just means that whatever you were trying to do failed, right? That thing did not reach the desired result you wanted, but it does not mean that you yourself as a person are a failure. And I think that's something that is always important to keep in mind, because we can take on something that didn't go our way and say, oh, I'm a failure, I'm just not good enough, or I just can't make it. But actually it's not you, it's just the thing. And when you're able to then separate the two, you're able to it's easier for you to kind of pick yourself up and look at it objectively and say, okay, how can I do better? How can I make this better? How can I, improve? So I think those are a couple of things that I feel I have used a lot in life, that I've learned through sport, and I use a lot in life. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Jocelyn. And I think so often we hear two of those elements coming so strongly in business or in corporate, and it's something we find ourselves having to also repeat to the younger generation. One is be kind to yourself, and you've said it right. And the second one is about mistakes and failures, because often that is associated with negativity. But until you're able to let go of that, you cannot see your growth that awaits you. So thank you so much for sharing that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jocelyn. Jasmine, I'm going to pose the next question to you because I'm reading it very similar to yourself. And Jocelyn, if you've got anything to add, if you can please type out as well. So the question is, how do you transition from an athlete to a professional? And, asking about, has it been hard to gain the trust of people, to show them that you're actually capable of being a serious professional, right? So that's a big pivot, right? Sports field professional. So can I ask the ladies to please
Actually,
comment on that?
I thought maybe Jocelyn would be a better choice because I mean, you know why? Because I started running really late, right? So I um I already had like my career in financial services, and I did like I was a stay-home mom for like 4 years with my kids, and then I became an athlete, and even during my um time as an athlete, I was never a professional athlete because in Singapore you cannot be a professional athlete. I mean, unless you're winning like Jocelyn, I mean, we were not paid. We had to take care of ourselves, and you know, had to take you have to have a job that pays your bill. So I was never like a professional athlete and not had a job or anything. So I had my professional life, and I was like a part-time athlete, if that makes sense.
But
It
maybe,
was
yeah,
a
maybe
side hustle that made it to the national stage, but I was not paid in any way. I wouldn't even consider myself a professional.
I guess maybe I'll just jump in here and say that I think first of all, it starts with your own mindset, right? And believing that you have something to offer in whatever you do. And I think a lot of times athletes are very single-minded in pursuing what they want. And so I take that same mindset into learning the next thing. So, for example, if I was going to start an outdoor camp for kids, right, it's taking that same mindset, taking that passion that I have to pass on something, and um, being a master of the space that I'm in. The same way I would, try to be a master of my event, my swimming. And so it's that same mindset. So I if anybody was to question me, I think first it's to believe in myself and believe that I know what I have to offer, right? And then it's selling that to them and helping them to see the strength, right, that comes from being an athlete and how you use that same strength to transition into another area of life.
Thank you so much for sharing on that. So appreciate it. Um, Deshaun, I want to talk to you. You spoke a lot about your journey and the challenges, being first looking at apartheid South Africa, breaking through it, but how being part of that expedition just opened up so many more avenues in terms of both career, but also allowed you to grow. Something that I am not sure if you still see it, but definitely still see it, is we do see a lot of DE&I challenges in the environment of work, sports, whatever. So, what advice would you be able to help give our listeners to help them navigate through these things, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's something they do, compete as a competitor, but also as a business leader, even so as a mom or a wife? These are challenges we are always stereotyped. What are some of the wisdom you can share with us?
Thank you, Charmaine. Yes, I think there's still so much work to be done in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. As a mom, I try to help my children understand how they would have to navigate the world given these challenges, but at the same time, I don't want them to be burdened by the idea of overcompensating so they can be seen to be excellent, effective. I've got smart kids. They're very competent, they're good at what they're doing. And I would love a world where they can just show up like that, without the filter of one's a boy, one's a girl, one's tall, one's short, without any of those filters or the intensity of your melanin. And yet we still really are in that world where if you and I showed up next to someone else, there'd be a filter. People are just, I guess the first impression is about 80% of what we all get when we look at someone. And so for me to navigate spaces is the older I'm getting, I'm 55 now, the more I feel like I need to step into a space intentionally to take up space, not in an aggressive way. I'm not an aggressive person by nature, but growing up in apartheid made me kind of have the sense that I need to apologize internally for being there. And so now I've pivoted that into I belong here. And it doesn't matter what the space is. I could walk into a space with 100 European men, and I would walk into that space with an I belong in this space. And I think for me, the first thing that I needed to overcome was that, so that my internal dialogue changes from how can I engage people effectively versus how do I make myself as small as possible so no one notices I'm here. um, and the best thing I can do to encourage people who deal with diversity challenges is start with a blank slate with anybody you encounter. Let people paint the picture for you. If you are the canvas and they are the painter, come in as a blank slate and allow them to fill it in for you. And if you are the painter and they're the canvas, see them as a blank slate and become curious about who you are, because your paintbrush will then paint in what they give you. And I just find the more we do that, the more we allow people to be themselves. And then DEI should really not matter anymore, because you're just engaging individual to individual.
Thank you so much, Deshaun. I really want to thank you know all of you for sharing your wisdom, and I think the common thread as we round off is really being intentional about our commitment to ourselves first. I think that came through very clear from each of the panelists is find yourself, find your true grounding, and commit to it. It's all about mindset, right? It came up in each of your sessions. Having those goals, leaning for support and saying it's okay to ask for help when things are not often working. And also very important is knowing where the expertise lie, who are there, and being comfortable to know that space. So thank you really for kind of building on those trends, and very important, highlighting the importance of learning from mistakes and failures, and really being kind to ourselves through this journey. So as we round off, I really want to say on behalf of the Chamber, thank you so much to our incredible speakers for your time today, and for the really inspiring stories, your insights, the nuggets of advice that you've shared with us, being able to engage with our audience. We really appreciate your advice shared, the contribution, and to everyone online for really engaging, sharing your reactions, sending through your questions amidst the busy schedules we all have. It really does mean a lot. So if any of you would like to learn more about the South African Chamber of Commerce in Singapore and how we can build business growth and between Singapore and South Africa, especially for women in business, please feel free to reach out to Kerry. She has put on her details on the invite. You would see her email address there, plus on our website. So please let's continue to build this community, championing for each other, pushing forward from finish lines to the front lines together. Today's recording will be made available and shared to everyone, plus on our chamber sites. So once again, until we meet, thank you everyone for your time and your support. Have a good afternoon and a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It
Thanks,
was great
everybody.
engaging with you all. Bye bye, everyone. Bye, Sajita. Bye, Jasmine. Bye, Jocelyn. Bye.